There is a strange, quiet feeling that often knocks on your door late at night. It usually arrives right around the time you turn 40 or step into midlife. You look around at the life you have spent decades carefully building for yourself. Your stable career, your relationships, the predictable routines you repeat every single day. And suddenly, out of nowhere, a terrifying question echoes in the silence of your mind. Is the person living this life actually me? Or am I just playing a role? You feel a deep, unsettling sense of being entirely lost in your own existence. It feels as if you have been wearing a heavy mask for so long that you have completely forgotten what your real face looks like. Society is quick to label this uncomfortable period as a typical midlife crisis. They tell you it is just a temporary panic about getting older and running out of time. But depth psychology, especially the profound work of Carl Jung, tells a very different story. What you are experiencing right now is not a breakdown. It is an awakening. Carl Jung believed that the first half of your life is merely a rough draft. You are not losing your mind. You are simply, finally losing your disguise. In the beginning of adulthood, you are simply following a blueprint handed to you. The first half of your life was heavily built upon these external expectations. You shaped your entire personality to fit perfectly into the structures given to you. You did what was necessary to survive, to be accepted, and to succeed. Carl Jung observed that we spend our youth frantically constructing a protective a vessel designed specifically to navigate the turbulent, demanding waters of society. But eventually, a quiet tragedy occurs. The vessel stops serving the soul inside. The achievements that used to bring you immense pride now feel strangely hollow. The societal goals you chase so aggressively suddenly seem completely and utterly pointless. This profound emptiness is not a failure, nor is it a sign of weakness. It is the undeniable realization that you have simply outgrown your own constructed life. The rough draft of your existence has been fully written, read, and exhausted. And now the hidden true author of your existence is demanding the pen. You are standing exactly at the threshold of the most important transition of your life, the terrifying, beautiful transition from being who you should be to who you actually are. To understand why this exhaustion feels so heavy, we must look at the mask itself. In Jungian psychology, this is called the persona, derived from the Latin word for an actor's mask. It is a necessary compromise you made between your authentic self and societal demands. And for a long time, it was incredibly useful. It helped you secure safety, approval, and success. But maintaining this lifelong compromise requires an astronomical amount of psychological energy. Every time you force a smile when you are secretly devastated inside, or agree politely when you completely disagree, you are actively suppressing your true nature. Psychology calls this cognitive load. And over several decades, it compounds into absolute, profound exhaustion. This is why you feel so incredibly drained at the end of a seemingly uneventful day. You are not physically tired from doing too much. You are soul tired from holding the mask up. By the time you reach midlife, the persona has become rigid, and it inevitably starts to crack. When the mask cracks, people around you will get uncomfortable. They will say you have changed. They preferred the fake role you were playing because it made their own lives convenient and predictable. But at this stage, your soul has absolutely no interest in making others comfortable anymore. Because the exhaustion you feel isn't from doing too much. It's from being someone you're not. But when you finally drop the mask, you are left alone with a terrifying reality. You realize you have spent so much time being the person you were supposed to be, that you genuinely have no idea who you actually are underneath it all. This is when the next major phase of Jungian psychology begins, the encounter with the shadow. The shadow is not evil. It is simply the collection of every part of yourself, every trait, emotion, and desire that society or your family deemed unacceptable. Your anger, your sadness, your raw creativity, and your fierce need for boundaries. To keep the persona perfectly intact, you had to aggressively lock the shadow in the basement. But around the age of 40, the shadow refuses to be ignored any longer. It starts leaking out in ways you simply cannot control. Sudden outbursts, deep resentment, a profound sense of apathy, or a desperate desire to burn your entire life down. People call this a crisis. They frantically urge you to put a new mask on. But Jung warned that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will mistakenly call it fate. The chaos you are feeling is simply your shadow, asking to finally be understood. For most of our lives, our immediate instinct is to run away from this darkness. We aggressively distract ourselves with more work, more achievements, or superficial relationships, desperately hoping that the external noise will drown out the quiet voice of unresolved pain. But the individual who is truly awakening at midlife does something incredibly brave. They simply, finally, stop running away. You realize that the only way out of the suffocating crisis is to go through it. You start to quietly examine the deep anger you were never allowed to express. You sit with the lingering, profound grief of the unlived portions of your life. You reconnect with the wild, untamed desires you buried just to be responsible. This specific process, although deeply painful and isolating at times, is actually the most profound act of self-love you will ever experience. Because you are finally no longer fighting a war against your own nature. Instead, you are bravely reclaiming every exiled part of your own brilliant soul. Your darkness isn't there to destroy your life or to bring you shame. It is simply asking to finally be integrated and understood. Once you finally embrace your true nature, a new heavy anxiety often sets in. You look at the rigid timeline society handed to you for success, and you realize that by starting over now, you feel completely left behind. Your peers seem to have everything figured out, running on a clear paved highway, while you are standing at the edge of an unmapped forest feeling like a failure. But the psychology of a late bloomer is widely and tragically misunderstood by society. Some minds are designed to grow quickly, producing early, visible results with shallow roots. They adapt easily to the surface level because they never truly question the soil. But a complex, deeply sensitive mind operates on an entirely different biological clock. For decades, you were not failing to grow or simply wasting your time. You were building a massive, invisible, and complex root system deep underground. You needed immense time to process, filter, and understand the overwhelming noise of the world. Fast, early growth is often fragile. When the inevitable storms of midlife arrive, those who built their lives on shallow social expectations often collapse entirely. You were never behind. You were simply on a journey that required a deeper map. As this profound internal shift takes root, you will likely notice something else occurring. Almost without you even trying, your social circle begins to dramatically and rapidly shrink. People you have known for years, sometimes even decades, quietly fade out of your life. Society is quick to view this sudden isolation as a tragic failure or a depression. From a deep psychological standpoint, this is a perfectly natural and necessary shedding process. Just as a healthy tree drops its dead leaves to conserve energy for new growth, your psyche is instinctively letting go of connections that no longer nourish your soul. You begin to realize that many of your past friendships were based strictly on the persona. They were deeply attached to the convenient role you played, not the actual person you are. To keep those specific people around, you would have to put the mask back on. And your newly integrated, awakened self simply refuses to perform that exhausting trick anymore. This period of intense solitude is actively required for what psychologists refer to as metacognition. It is the rare ability to quietly observe and evaluate your own deep thinking patterns. Constant socialization prevents this, keeping you endlessly reacting to the noise of other people's expectations. You are not becoming antisocial or bitter. You are simply, finally becoming pro-self. In this newfound, deeply sacred solitude, the true work of the second half of life finally begins. Carl Jung called this ultimate, profound inner journey the process of individuation. It is the difficult, necessary process of becoming the authentic person you were always meant to be. Not by adding more external achievements, but by violently stripping away everything that isn't you. For the first 40 years of life, your ego was the strict manager of your existence. The ego's primary job was simply to keep you safe, ensuring you fit seamlessly into the crowd. But safety and true psychological growth that are two completely and entirely different paths. Individuation requires the ego to finally and respectfully step down from the throne. It forces you to surrender control to a much deeper, older part of your psyche, the self. This profound transition of power feels terrifying, exactly like losing your mind or losing your drive. But you are not falling into the abyss. You are finally, for the very first time, being caught, held securely by this deeper wisdom. You begin to quietly gather all the scattered, fragmented pieces of your history, your past mistakes, your deep regrets, your unfulfilled dreams, and your long-buried passions. You stop viewing them as failures and start seeing them as absolutely vital ingredients. Because the ultimate psychological goal of life is not to be perfect. The goal is to be whole. As you emerge from this intense period of internal unlearning and profound integration, you will notice that your core motivations have completely and permanently shifted. In the first half of your life, you were likely driven by external success. But Carl Jung noted that we cannot live the afternoon of life according to the morning's program, because what was highly valued in the morning will be considered little at evening. This means you suddenly lose all interest in the rigid societal ladder you were told to climb. You no longer feel the burning need to prove your worth to people who don't know you. Instead, your soul begins to demand something much quieter, but infinitely deeper. Meaning, you begin to actively seek out authentic experiences rather than performative, empty achievements. A quiet morning routine, a deeply honest conversation, or simply a walk in nature. These simple, grounded moments suddenly hold far more weight than any prestigious job title. You stop worrying about wasting time and start focusing deeply on simply experiencing time. You have transitioned from being guided by the noisy crowd to being guided by inner authority. Your internal compass is finally calibrated to your own true north, not the world's demands. You have successfully traded the exhausting pursuit of success for the sustaining pursuit of meaning. Armed with this profound inner compass, your relationship with the external world changes entirely. When society attempts to hand you unreasonable obligations, toxic expectations, or heavy guilt, your newly integrated shadow steps forward. It is no longer a monster, but a bodyguard. It provides you with the fierce, unapologetic energy required to set an absolute boundary. You stop over-explaining yourself. You stop apologizing for simply taking up space. And you no longer feel a single drop of guilt for disappointing those who cross your boundaries. This is exactly why cutting people off after midlife is rarely an act of malice or anger. It is a deeply peaceful, almost clinical removal of toxicity from your limited energy space. Like a master gardener carefully pruning dead, energy-draining branches from an ancient tree, ensuring that the core of the organism can finally thrive, breathe, and bear true fruit. By refusing to wear the old, cracked masks to entertain the gray crowds of society, you finally create a beautiful, quiet, empty space in your life. A space that can only be filled by those who resonate with your true, unmasked frequency. You happily trade a crowded room full of exhausting, performative strangers for a quiet, deeply nourishing table of true companions. Society aggressively pushes the narrative that entering your 40s is the beginning of the end. They draw life as a mountain, where everything after midlife is a slow, tragic descent. The gray crowd walks with their heads down, mourning the loss of their youthful energy. But if you have successfully navigated the shadow, this timeline flips entirely upside down. Jungian psychology views this not as a decline, but as a necessary, painful metamorphosis. The crumbling of your old life was simply the breaking of a restrictive chrysalis. You are finally developing the psychological infrastructure needed to hold your true, immense power. This is the profound, hidden advantage of the so-called late bloomer. Because you spent decades quietly observing, feeling, and processing the depths of the world, you now possess a quiet, unbreakable authority that cannot be taught in youth. When the world panics or tries to force its frantic urgency upon you, you remain still. You no longer feel the desperate need to shout to prove that you exist. All the massive psychological energy you once wasted on maintaining the persona is now returned. It is returned directly to your core, becoming available for pure, authentic creation. You are not running out of time. You are finally truly ready to use it. When you finally step back into the world, you carry a very different energy. You no longer project the exhausting, flawless image of the perfect employee or partner. Carl Jung famously stated, "I would rather be whole than good." Perfection is a fragile, glassy illusion that shatters the moment life gets difficult. Wholeness, however, means containing both the brilliant light and the darkest shadows within yourself. It means giving yourself the radical permission to be a beautifully flawed human being. When you make a mistake now, the harsh inner critic is completely silent. Instead, it is replaced by a gentle, profound sense of self-compassion. And this authenticity has a strange magnetic ripple effect on the people around you. When you drop your heavy mask, it unconsciously gives others permission to drop theirs. You will find that the few relationships that survive this transition become incredibly deep. They shift from being transactional exchanges to genuine, soul-level connections. This is the true harvest of the late bloomer's long, invisible winter. The fruit you bear now is not for the approval of the fleeting crowd. It is the rich, undeniable expression of a fully integrated, realized soul. When you look back at the first half of your life with this new clarity, you finally understand that none of the pain, confusion, or conformity was actually a mistake. It was simply the intense, necessary training ground required to break your own ego. Now, the restrictive blueprint is completely gone, leaving you with an empty canvas. For the very first time in your entire life, you hold the pen entirely alone. There are no parents, no societal structures, and no insecure peers guiding your hand anymore. This brings us back to the crushing, universal fear that you have bloomed too late. The concept of being late is an illusion completely constructed by the industrial world. Nature does not possess a watch. A deep root takes exactly as long as it needs. While others are sprinting towards a finish line just to prove they got there first, you have finally given yourself the ultimate luxury, the permission to walk slowly. Because you are no longer operating on society's schedule. You are operating on the soul's timeline. The breakdown you experience was never meant to destroy you. It was meant to clear the foundation. Everything before this moment was just an incredibly long, necessary rehearsal for the main event. Because the first half of your life was survival, the second half is creation. So if you are currently sitting in the deeply uncomfortable ruins of your midlife transition, do not rush to frantically rebuild the exact same suffocating structure as before. Do not reach into the trash to glue the broken pieces of your persona back together. Instead, have the profound courage to simply sit in the quiet clearing you have finally created. Allow your deep, established root system to quietly absorb the authentic nourishment it needs. Understand that the people who judge your new, peaceful, seemingly unproductive, slower pace are usually just terrified of stepping off the frantic, endless treadmill themselves. They are deeply terrified of the profound silence that you have just bravely mastered, because you are now completely free to build a life based strictly on internal resonance, a quiet, honest life where your outer world finally beautifully matches your inner truth. This is the ultimate, hidden, and deeply powerful gift of being a late bloomer. You actually get to live the second half of your existence as a completely whole person, with all your sharp, dark edges and all your brilliant light entirely and beautifully integrated. You finally realize you are not late to the party. You simply spent decades in the wrong building. And now, fully awake, the real journey can finally, truly commence. So take a deep breath. Look gently at the fragments of the life you outgrew. You are not behind schedule. You are not a failure. You are simply a profound late bloomer who required a much deeper, vastly more complex root system to sustain the massive, incredible growth that is finally about to happen. Let the old, rigid, exhausting persona stay broken on the floor where it belongs. Let the people who only ever loved that fake mask naturally walk away and genuinely welcome the incredibly profound, beautiful solitude that takes their place. Because it is inside it, this exact quiet space, on this perfectly blank page, that the second half of your life, the deeply authentic, unshakable, and truly powerful half, finally begins. Carl Jung was absolutely right. The first half of life was just a draft. Now it is finally time to write the masterpiece. The contents of this video are for reflection and reference only, and do not replace professional psychological advice. If you are struggling, please reach out to someone you trust or a professional.